Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to Palm Sunday 1965, The Forgotten Super Outbreak. I don't think I've ever heard of this before. I do a lot of these reactions, as you know by now. I find this stuff very fascinating. A lot of it's from the past, a lot of it's old, a lot of it's more recent. It's all a mixture of things, right? And I've done in the past like earthquake reactions and stuff, but tornadoes are the ones that just keep sucking me back in. That was a good little use of words there. Sucking me in, tornado. God damn it, man. I'm a little poet over here, but I do find it interesting, and I mean I've not heard of this one before, but outbreaks. There was a recent outbreak about a month ago, maybe a little bit less now, that I've done a few reactions to. One on my Patreon because I couldn't post it to YouTube because with weather reactions you got to be careful, as I've learned. I did also post one on YouTube. I don't think that was a breakout, but breakouts are just, yeah, when you see multiple tornadoes being formed, you got some, like the video that I done yesterday, the big breakout with a few EF5s and stuff. It's just crazy to see that you can have multiple damaging tornadoes, not just one or two, but multiple tens. I'd say hundreds, but maybe not hundreds. But yeah, it's fascinating to see, and this is from 1965. We're just gonna check this out. And yeah, links are also in the description to my Patreon if you want to see reactions that I can't post to YouTube, movies, TV series, all that stuff. Links there for those who want to see that. But let's check this out.
April 11th, 1965. It's a beautiful sunny afternoon across northern Indiana, and residents all across the state are beginning to venture outdoors to enjoy the pleasant spring weather after a long and brutal winter. None of them could have imagined that in just a few short hours, they would be at the center of one of the worst tornado outbreaks in American history. It's April 10th, and meteorologists working at the U.S. Weather Bureau's Severe Local Storms Unit, or SELS, are monitoring a massive wave of low pressure called a trough that is moving in over the central United States, bringing with it a large zone of fast-moving winds in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. This powerful trough generates an unseasonably strong surface low-pressure system called a mid-latitude cyclone, drawing in not only warm moist air from the Gulf of Mexico, but also a layer of warm dry air aloft originating from the desert southwest called the Elevated Mixed Layer, or EML. As these air masses begin to migrate to the northeast, the EML begins to overspread an expansive plume of warm moist air, placing a capping inversion, or lid, on the atmosphere. This capping inversion is preventing the warm moist air near the surface from rising and forming clouds, allowing the sun to continue heating up the air near the surface and creating a very unstable atmosphere, with the amount of energy available for thunderstorms rising to over 1,000 joules per kilogram. At the same time, the rapidly strengthening surface low-pressure system is drawing in a powerful low-level jet of air rushing north, while the winds just above turn rapidly towards the east and spread apart with height, generating record levels of wind shear, measuring over 100 knots in the lowest 6 kilometers of the atmosphere. These meteorological factors are coming together to create
It's forming in a region around here. There's going to be a super outbreak in this region, I'm assuming. I mean, I know this region does get tornadoes just from seeing loads of videos based on this stuff, but there being a super outbreak here is not what I was expecting, but there you go. It shows it's possible just throughout this whole region, really, just here. To us, it can happen anywhere. It's just more likely in these areas or these areas here.
Volatile atmosphere that will cause any storms that develop to organize into powerful, long-lived thunderstorms with rapidly rotating updrafts called supercells, capable of producing long-track, violent tornadoes. It's now 12:30 p.m., and the meteorologists at the SCLS office in Kansas City, noting that all the key ingredients of a devastating tornado outbreak have fallen into place over the Midwest, issue a severe weather forecast statement for northern Illinois, eastern Iowa, and southern Wisconsin, noting the possibility of supercell thunderstorms capable of producing powerful tornadoes. And only a few minutes later, that terrible possibility would come true. Just before 1 p.m.
I assume there's not much footage of this, right? This is 1965. I'm assuming these times the possibilities of seeing anything aren't really there because cameras aren't going to be, well, camcorders aren't going to be accessible, or I don't even know if they were a thing here. So we're going to just have to, I guess, rely on maybe a few news station things, but even then, probably nothing there either.
A region of extremely fast-moving winds aloft within the larger trough called a jet streak overspreads the cold front into the open warm sector, and the capping inversion that has been holding down the powder keg of instability below it breaks, and supercell thunderstorms explode ahead of the cold front. The first tornado of the day would reach the Earth at 12:55 p.m. Central Standard Time, just northeast of Tipton, Iowa, and track for roughly 32 miles, obliterating numerous farms at violent intensity before lifting near Springbrook, Iowa, taking a man's life with it. The same supercell thunderstorm responsible for the violent tornado near Springbrook cycled and produced another family of tornadoes, including a twister that hit Monroe, Wisconsin, damaging numerous structures, including a hotel which had its roof removed, and another near Evansville that tracked for 23 miles before producing a strong tornado near Jefferson, Wisconsin, reaching over 3/4 of a mile wide, leveling a forest, tossing cars off the roads, and destroying numerous buildings. The tornado would track for a total of 14 miles, claiming 3 lives before dissipating near Ashipun. Further to the south, another cluster of supercells formed over northern Illinois, spawning several damaging tornadoes, including a strong tornado that struck near Druce Lake, and a devastating tornado that formed near the Crystal Lake area, damaging or destroying numerous structures, tossing large vehicles through the air, completely sweeping away several homes, and scattering both debris and victims considerable distances away. The tornado claimed the lives of 6 people, leaving behind terrible destruction. However, the nightmare was only just beginning. It's now 4 p.m., and the conditions in the open warm sector ahead of the cold front are rapidly deteriorating into one of the most volatile atmospheres for tornadoes ever seen over the Midwest. And at 4:20 p.m., the SCLS unit issued another severe weather forecast for a portion of this area over northern Indiana to northwestern Ohio and southern Michigan, expecting strong tornadoes. Only a few minutes later, more supercells exploded along the cold front in northeastern Illinois and quickly drifted to the northeast. One of these storms became dominant and at 4:45 p.m. produced its first tornado. The tornado reached the Earth as a narrow funnel near Hamlet before causing its first major damage near Coons Lake, damaging or destroying hundreds of structures, and continued to gradually widen. It then passed near the outskirts of the town of La Paz, where several photographs were taken of the tornado by the Indiana State Police, showing the tornado as a brilliant white tube moving quickly across the farmland. However, as the La Paz tornado is beginning to weaken, the same parent supercell thunderstorm cycles and produces a second, even more violent and far more infamous tornado 3 miles to its southeast. Twin twisters were now tearing through northern Indiana. At 5:18 p.m.
These would have been both visible, like, I guess, say you're like here at this point in time, you're in this region, you're literally seeing both of them at this point. I guess for you, in your case, you're happy because it's not hitting you or they're not hitting you. But Jesus, man, that would be some crazy sight to see. Or maybe if you just like here, I don't really know if you could see through a tornado to like see another tornado through this tornado. But I mean, I assume if there's a certain point where you can see both of them in the sky at the same time. Here, obviously, you're looking this way and then you're looking this way. I'm trying to think, but just here, you're here. You can see this one, you can see that one. Mad. And I assume this one's going to get massive.
Yeah, the southern twin rapidly...
Seeing all this stuff, man, imagine how... Like, imagine just the worst possible tornado that this region, not this region, just the US mainland has ever seen. Like, forget when humans were there, just in general. Maybe when dinosaurs were around. I'm assuming, like we've been tracking tornadoes for maybe the last 100 and so plus years. And we've seen some crazy ones. Bro, that's nothing. We've had billions of years on this planet. The land's been here for billions of years, although I guess maybe because the continents were different. Let's just say how the continents are now. We've had a good few million years. I'd say probably hundreds of millions of years, to be fair. I don't know how fast it takes for continents to move. Now, say we've had 10 million years like the continents. I don't know, that's way too long. Humans have been here for like only a few 100,000 years. God damn it, it's crazy to actually put it into context how long time has been. Just basically, the tornadoes that must have been on this land or on the planet in the history, I'm assuming we've had things that dwarf the stuff that we've seen. Like, scary to a point of like, yeah, this is devastating tens of miles of land because they're just going to be so wide. But Who knows? But yeah, it's crazy to think, man.
Strengthened.
Sorry, I make it so hard to explain stuff. It's my bad.
Slammed into the town of Wakarusa, Indiana, causing severe damage to many structures and claiming the life of a child before racing off to the northeast. At 5:24 p.m., the La Paz tornado to the north dissipates as the rapidly strengthening tornado just to its south begins to close in on the town of Midway. What followed is one of the most iconic moments in the history of violent tornadoes. At 5:30 p.m., reporter Paul Huffman and his wife Betty are traveling northwest on US Route 33 when they suddenly notice the swirling dark cloud of the approaching twister. As the monster approaches, Paul takes a series of 6 photographs showing the tornado splitting into twin funnels orbiting around each other as the tornado obliterates the Midway trailer court, claiming the lives of 10 people and injuring countless others. Past Midway, the tornado raced to the northeast, obliterating the small subdivision of Jefferson Place, killing several more before slamming into the outskirts of the town of Middlebury, tossing cars and destroying numerous homes before finally dissipating just northwest of the main part of town, claiming the lives of 31 people. Yet, at the same time the Midway tornado is devastating the community of Wakarusa, 60 miles back to the west, another long-track powerful supercell, trailing just behind the first, strengthens and at 5:10 p.m. produces the first tornado in a devastating tornado family that will continue for the next 200 miles. The tornado caused no visible damage for the first 14 miles of its life before strengthening considerably as it approached the town of South Wanata and was photographed by a nearby local, appearing as a tall cone tornado with a debris cloud at the surface while destroying several rural homes and barns, several of which were destroyed at near violent intensity. However, the tornado thankfully remained quite narrow and caused minimal damage and no fatalities as it tracked through a mostly rural area, leaving severe damage in its wake. Meanwhile, back to the east, at the same time the Midway tornado is beginning to weaken, its parent supercell once again cycles and produces yet another tornado 5 miles to its south at 5:40 p.m. Starting out as a waterspout.
What I'm thinking, have these tornadoes that have been like nearby each other, have they ever combined before? I might have asked that a long time ago before, and I might have got an answer to it. But has there been a scenario where 2 tornadoes have combined? I guess maybe there has, but maybe there were smaller tornadoes, so it didn't cause much more damage. Or maybe there has been cases where they've combined and it's just created a monster tornado at that point. I don't know, though. I don't know if that's really possible, or if it does happen, like what the possibilities are. But yeah, this started as a water spout as well. That's crazy.
Over the Goshen Pond, the tempest caused no visible damage for the first 8 miles of its track before rapidly intensifying as the storm destroyed several farms near Indiana State Road 13. The tornado then struck the community of Rainbow Lake just south of Shipshewana, causing devastating damage as it obliterated 12 homes and swept their foundations clean of debris, killing 17 people. Those who lived to tell their stories described the tornado as a cage of serpents writhing around a central point that evolved into a large beast with tentacle-like appendages reaching out horizontally.
I know this isn't the same one, but Jesus, this formed quick.
Those who lived to tell their stories described the tornado as a cage of serpents writhing around a central point that evolved into a large beast with tentacle-like appendages reaching out horizontally. The unmistakable sign of a multiple vortex tornado. The tornado traveled for another 20 miles before finally dissipating around 6 p.m. However, from here the outbreak turned it up to 11. Around the same time that the Shipshewana tornado is beginning to dissipate, more supercells erupt ahead of the cold front in west central Indiana, while at the same time, the storms previously responsible for the outbreak of tornadoes in Illinois begin to make landfall in Michigan, once again producing tornadoes, the most significant of which would strike near Allendale, Michigan, inflicting moderate to severe damage to a few homes before becoming violent near the Comstock Park area, just north of Grand Rapids, destroying over 200 homes with catastrophic intensity and claiming the lives of 5 people. Meanwhile, back to the south in Indiana, the supercell responsible for the Shipshewana tornado once again cycles and produces another tornado at 6 p.m., while at the same time, one of the supercells initiating ahead of the cold front further to the south in central Indiana rapidly intensifies and at 6:07 p.m. produces the first in a family of tornadoes that will continue for the next 274 miles. The tornado destroyed several homes at moderate intensity early in its life before inflicting violent damage to some homes near the towns of Cambria, Mulberry, and Moran, causing over 40 injuries before suddenly dissipating and immediately dropping yet another violent tornado just to the south of the town of Middle Fork. Unbelievably, at the exact same moment, the supercell responsible for the Wanata tornado cycles and produces an even more intense tornado at 6:10 p.m., heading straight for the city of Dunlap, Indiana. The tornado started out damaging trees just west of State Road 331, traveling through a mostly rural area, claiming 2 lives as it rapidly intensified into an extremely violent tornado, closing in on the same areas impacted by the Midway tornado an hour earlier. Yet, because of the damage caused by the first tornado, very few people received warning of the monster roaring towards them.
Do you know how mad that is? People in this area have already just been basically facing all this stuff, and now they're just getting hit again 1 hour later. What the hell are the chances of that?
The tornado then slammed into the Sunnyside and Kingston Heights subdivisions, obliterating homes and causing incredible damage to numerous structures, sweeping their foundations clean, granulating the debris and scattering it for long distances, throwing vehicles and mangling them into unrecognizable balls of steel. And in some spots, the winds became so intense that grass was scoured from the ground, leaving behind just bare soil. A photo taken in the damage path of the Midway tornado shows the menacing Dunlap tornado in the distance.
Jeez.
The tornado continued for another 20 miles, damaging additional communities near Hunters Lake and the Indiana Turnpike, lofting more vehicles before finally dissipating just south of the Michigan border, taking 36 lives with it and injuring over 300 more, making it the deadliest tornado of the Palm Sunday outbreak and one of the most violent tornadoes to ever strike the state of Indiana. With tornado reports becoming so numerous, it became impossible for the Weather Bureau office in Indiana to keep up, and the decision was made to take an unprecedented step and place the entire northern half of the state under a blanket tornado warning due to the sheer number of tornadoes ongoing. Back to the east, the same lead supercell responsible for the La Paz, Midway, and Shipshewana tornadoes produced yet another and far larger tornado around 6 p.m. near Lake Pleasant. The twister rapidly widened and intensified as it approached the community of Lake Pleasant, slamming into the lakeside community with terrifying power, causing extreme damage to many structures, reducing them to piles of rubble, and completely debarking and denuding trees, snapping the trunks and bending what was left to the ground. As the tornado crossed the border into Michigan, a local sheriff monitoring the situation gained a visual on the approaching monster and tried to use his radio to alert those downstream before his vehicle was thrown and rolled several times by the winds of the tornado, causing severe injuries. The twister continued to grow in both size and strength as it approached cold.
I assume the sheriff survived. He didn't say anything about dying or being killed. He just said severe injuries. I don't know, but if that's the case, jeez.
Coldwater Lake, expanding to over a mile wide as it exploded several lakeside homes, sweeping their foundations clean, ripping the grass out of its roots, tossing vehicles for hundreds of yards through the air, and scattering both debris and victims into the lake, resulting in 18 deaths. A picture of the tornado was taken near this area, showing the massive tornado looming in the distance as it grew to nearly 2 miles wide and ripped a large steel tank from its anchoring and threw
2 miles wide? What the hell am I seeing?
it over half a mile away. At the same moment, 100 miles to the southwest, the tornado that has just formed south of Middle Fork rapidly intensifies and grows to 3/4 of a mile wide prior to impacting the town of Russiaville. The tornado obliterated the small community, destroying over 90% of the structures in town before expanding to over 1 mile wide and crashed into the nearby towns of Alto and Kokomo, becoming violent. The tornado devastated the two communities, destroying over 100 homes along its track before growing even stronger as it impacted the community of Greentown, Indiana, and caused incredible damage to numerous structures. The tornado struck with such fury that homes were completely leveled and swept away, trees were completely debarked and denuded, vehicles were thrown for hundreds of yards, and the grass was scoured from the ground. The tornado would claim the lives of 18 people and injured over 600 others in this area before moving on to the east and leaving behind peculiar circular scratches in the ground called cycloidal marks before passing through the southern edge of the city of Marion, decimating more structures, with a few being completely swept away and heavily damaging both a hospital and a shopping center. In all, the tornado would cause the deaths of 25 people and injured over 800 more before finally lifting near the small community of Arcana. Just to the south, at the same time the Russiaville tornado is striking the town of Alto, the supercell just to its south produces its first tornado at 6:36 p.m. just southeast of Crawfordsville, claiming its first life as it traveled through the rural farmland before rapidly widening to over 1 mile wide as it approached the northern edge.
What am I seeing? These are multiple, huge tornadoes, and this is all in the same day. In the same few hours, even. What the hell is going
To
on?
the town of Lebanon. The mile-wide tornado devastated the small community north of town, obliterating more than 50 homes, lofting vehicles over 100 yards, and leveling a shopping center before racing off to the east, where it struck the town of Sheridan with brutal force, obliterating numerous homes and sweeping their foundations clean with the debris granulated to small shards, and trees were debarked. In total, the tornado would be responsible for the deaths of 28 people and injured over 100 others before finally dissipating just south of Arcadia. Back in Michigan, additional storms produced even more tornadoes, including a violent tornado that struck just north of Lansing, killing one along with two other strong tornadoes that passed the northern outskirts of Kalamazoo, destroying numerous structures and injuring 17, and another that struck Hastings, injuring an additional 5. However, back to the south, one of the most tragic stories of the entire outbreak was about to take place.
I think I've just clocked. Basically, there's another line on the same exact area that's just been hit. This is relentless, man. This is absolutely relentless. I can't believe what I'm seeing.
As the massive 2-mile-wide monster that struck Coldwater Lake is narrowing in on the communities south of Hillsdale, Michigan, the same supercell responsible for the devastating Dunlap tornado looms right behind it. And as the survivors and first responders of the first
Nah, this is brutal, man.
tornado in Coldwater Lake crawl their way out of the rubble to perform search and rescue, the Dunlap storm suddenly produces another massive violent tornado right on top of them, sweeping away anything that remained as vehicles, first responders, and victims alike were thrown over a quarter-mile away. Twin mile-wide monsters were now terrorizing the same communities in southern Michigan. Back to the west, the first of the two massive tornadoes slams into the community of Bob East Lake, destroying many structures and lofting a freight train into the lake before widening again as it struck the communities of Manitou Beach, obliterating and completely sweeping away several homes and scattering the debris into nearby Devils and Round Lakes. The local church, with dozens of people attending the Palm Sunday services, collapsed in the face of the violent winds, trapping over 50 people for hours and killing 8 of them. 30 minutes after the first, the second massive wedge tornado again tracks over the same areas as the first and impacts the residents around Bob East Lake and Manitou Beach a second time, hitting many of the same homes impacted by the first tornado and causing numerous additional fatalities. Tragically, 6 of those fatalities came from just one family who perished after surviving the first tornado when the second hit their home. Back to the east, the first tornado continued to smash the rural areas near the town of Onstead and Tipton, followed closely behind by the second. After both tornadoes had passed, 94% of the structures in the town of Tipton were destroyed as the paths of the two enormous wedge tornadoes became increasingly difficult to tell apart. Further to the northeast, the first twister passed very close to the town of Tecumseh and hit an anemometer on top of a tower at the local airport. Despite only being grazed by the outer edge of the tornado's circulation, the anemometer recorded an unbelievable wind speed of 151 miles per hour as the center of the tornado passed just to its north, a record for the highest wind speed ever measured in a tornado that would stand for the next 26 years. The two tornadoes would continue for another 20 miles, causing additional destruction to the city of Milan before dissipating 30 miles southwest of Detroit. In total, the two massive tornadoes carved a combined path of complete devastation over 90 miles long and at points nearly 4 miles wide, claiming the lives of 44 people and injuring nearly 600 others.
That is fucked, man. Imagine how unlucky you've got to be to have just been hit by some monster tornado and then you're getting followed up by a tornado that's just as brutal. Maybe not as big, but just as brutal. You just can't really comprehend that, man. How unlucky you have to be to face that. It's just beyond comprehension.
Back to the south,
Awful,
the supercell responsible for the tornado that leveled most of Greentown and Russiaville cycles and produces a third violent tornado at 7:20 p.m. near the town of Rural, Indiana, causing severe to violent damage as it passed through the towns of Keystone, Lynn Grove, Byrne, Wilshire, and Jonestown, leveling many homes and large structures and leaving behind additional cycloidal marks before abruptly dissipating. Despite the tornado's terrifying power, it thankfully traveled through a relatively rural area over its 50-mile track, resulting in only 4 deaths and 125 injuries. From here, the outbreak moved into Ohio, as the same thunderstorm responsible for the previous tornadoes cycled and produced the storm's 4th violent tornado north of the town of Elida, resulting in the deaths of 13 people and injuring 103 others before dissipating southeast of Findlay. At the same exact time, another supercell formed 50 miles to its north, approaching the city of Toledo, Ohio, and produced one of the most intense and devastating tornadoes of the entire outbreak.
What
The
the
twister
fuck?
reached the earth at 7:30 p.m., decimating numerous homes in the Toledo suburbs to an incredible degree, with many of them being completely destroyed with the debris swept clean off their foundations. Vehicles were once again lofted and thrown great distances through the air, including a bus that was flipped and crushed, resulting in the deaths of 5 people on Interstate 75. An alleged photograph of the event surfaced showing the tornado as a
Ugh.
haunting pair of glowing
This just looks like it's an alien invasion. What the fuck?
funnels, displaying some sort of strange electrical phenomena as the twister terrorized the Toledo suburbs. In all, the tornado would result in the deaths of 18 people and injured over 200 others before disappearing into the darkness over Lake Erie. After the Toledo tornado, several other significant tornadoes would touch down across Ohio, including a violent tornado that struck near the town of Fort Loramie, killing 3, and a long-track tornado that struck the town of Rockaway, killing 4 more, before the same supercell thunderstorm responsible for the 4 previous violent tornadoes across central Indiana approaches the outskirts of Cleveland, Ohio, and at 11:08 p.m. produces another monster twister masked by the darkness of night. The tornado touched down just southwest of Pittsfield and struck the town only minutes later, causing incredible destruction, with dozens of homes literally vanishing into the darkness, with no trace of them ever found. Nearly the entire town was obliterated, with almost nothing left remaining. The tornado destroyed several additional communities at varying strength before reaching northern Strongsville, where it once again completely leveled many homes with the debris swept away, leaving nothing left of the structures, before dissipating just northeast of town, taking 18 lives with it and injuring 200 others. As the night drew on, a few other weaker tornadoes would strike rural communities across Ohio, but thankfully for the survivors, the outbreak was finally coming to an end.
Fuck me, man.
By the time the sun had risen on April 12th, 266 people had been
And this was all during the night. Oh my god. This is fuck.
killed, with more than 3,000
How
sustaining
many?
266 people had been killed, with more than 3,000 sustaining life-altering injuries from an onslaught of at least 55 tornadoes stretching across the Midwest in what would come to be the second most violent tornado outbreak in U.S. history and the 4th deadliest day for tornadoes ever recorded in the United States. The Palm Sunday tornado outbreak would go down as the single most destructive day for tornadoes in American history, leaving behind apocalyptic levels of death and destruction, matched only by the 1925 tri-state tornado and the 1974 and 2011 super outbreaks. Tragically, the Palm Sunday tornado struck on a religious holiday weekend on the first warm day of the year, luring many outside and away from both shelter and a way of receiving warnings, greatly magnifying the terribly high death toll and forcing the National Weather Service to make sweeping changes in the way they warn the public about tornadoes. Yet, despite the unimaginable levels of devastation, one man took a particular interest in the damage left behind by the historic tornado outbreak. A 44-year-old Dr. Tetsuya Fujita seized the opportunity to document such a
Fujita.
historic
So the Fujita scale. Damn.
event in unprecedented detail, chartering a series of flights to survey the damage from the air and reconstruct the entire outbreak, using his meticulous documentation of the damage to put forward new theories on the internal structure of tornadoes, and developed a new way of categorizing a tornado's strength based on the damage they leave behind, called the F-scale, ensuring that those who lost their lives in the devastating Palm Sunday tornado outbreak were not lost in vain.
Jeez, that was from this breakout. Flipping hell, man. I mean, this was shocking. I mean, whenever it comes to outbreaks, you know you're expecting to see crazy things like this, like tornadoes combining, or not combining, following the same paths and stuff. It's just, yeah, man. That sort of stuff is rare for a reason, but jeez, that twins photo is one of the most famous images. Yeah, that is crazy, man. I mean, it's a scarily beautiful photo, if you know what I mean. Like, it looks incredible, but at the same time horrifying. Getting double tapped by tornadoes is crazy. I mean, you're just recovering and then you're getting flipping hit again. How unlucky can you be, man? But this was the Palm Sunday 1965 super outbreak, and yeah, this was shocking. Let me know your thoughts on this. If you want to see some more reactions like this, let me know in the comments. I do find this stuff very interesting, as I say every single time. But yeah, that's it. Until next time, peace.